you'd pick what kind of detail account it is. You add your name, you add your number if you do it, and then you would add a description if you wanted it. You would pick a sub account if you wanted to nestle things under each other, which is important when we talk about the reporting. So we're just kind of just know that this is here. So you would, Kevin, your question, you would use sub accounts if you had, so like for a bar or a restaurant, for example, bars and restaurants sell food and they sell beverages, right? So under your food sales, for example, you could have different departments of food sales. You could have your, well, you could have sales, your catering sales separate from your sales in your store. Under your beverages, you could have non-alcoholic beverages, beers, wine, all of those kind of things. So if you needed it for something like on your reporting, that's when you would create a sub account. So it'll make more sense when we talk about the reporting later, but just know that it's there. Sorry. The other thing that you can do is, let's say we don't want our beer sales to be part of our labor anymore. We could click this drop down, go to edit, and you could uncheck the box to make it a sub account. And then when you save it, then it's going to back it back up and not indent it like these things. So here, decks and patios is a sub account of job materials, and job materials is a sub account of landscaping services. So on the financial statements, decks and patios, fountains, plants and soil, and sprinklers will subtotal together under job materials. But then labor, installation, maintenance, and repair, all of these accounts will subtotal under landscaping services, okay? All right. Okay, a couple other things on this page. Here, under your bank accounts, these little arrows, these little yellow arrows, the back and forth arrows, that means it's linked to an outside bank source. We'll talk about that when we get to the banking menu. When you're in these things, you can edit your accounts and you can break the connection here if you ever need to. Sometimes it's important to do that if you need to merge accounts together and they're both have an active link. You would need to break the link before you could do it. You can click view register on anything and it's going to give you that old kind of desktop register view of QuickBooks that we're kind of used to seeing from desktop. Let's say that we don't use this savings account anymore. So you would disconnect it here. Sorry, it's not going to let me do it because you could make it inactive. And then it will come off the list. So now it doesn't show there. If you made something inactive by mistake, you would click here and you would on the settings and you would include the inactive, and then we would see the savings account here. So we could then make it active again. All right, and all versions of QuickBooks across the top, if it's not a sample company, it'll tell you how many chart of accounts you're using against the limit, the 250 limit that are in most of them. If you want to print your chart of accounts, you would click that little print button and it would come off with the PDF, for example. I find this, a printed list is not really helpful. We used to print them all the time, but it's not really that important anymore. If you click this run report button, this one is more helpful. So if you ever want to build an integration with QuickBooks to something else, like your payroll company, for example, you would need to send them your chart of accounts. So again, you would go to your chart of accounts, you would click run report, and then from this report, these 4 little icons here in the corner of every report, you can email the report, you can print the report, or you can export the report. So then you could export it to Excel, which is how most integration companies would want to work with your QuickBooks. And then it's going to spit out an Excel document. This is my document for later. It's going to print out an Excel document of your chart of accounts, and then you would email them this document. Okay, let me make sure I covered all of those. All right, the one other thing, if you're in if you're in the accounts, anywhere where there is an account name, so this is a chart of account report, or on your balance sheet or on your income statement, if you double click on the account name, it's going to open this little account dialog box. So then you could change this to, say something else, whatever you wanted to do. Or you can make it a sub account of something. Okay. So you can double click on things to have it update whatever you wanted, if you wanted to get to this window and make a quick change. Okay. Questions about the chart of accounts? Sweet. You guys are so easy today. I love it. All right. Okay. Products and services. So page 46. And I'm gonna, all right. The products and services are the things that you sell. So these are items that, for those of you that use QuickBooks Desktop, these are called items. So it's your item list. In QuickBooks Online, they're called products and services. It's what you sell and how you collect money. In a nonprofit world, it's your donations. So products and services are always used on sales transactions, like sales receipts or invoices. And they could be used on expense transactions. When you use the products and services, they generally point to some revenue account on your financial statements. So when we're looking at our profit and loss, for example, it's these revenue accounts up here are driven by what's on our products and services list. Using products and services allows you to get a lot of detail from your business. For example, if you're a restaurant, your products and services could be each item on your menu or each major category of items, like breakfast items, lunch items, liquor, etc., instead of just food sales. Every time you sell one, the receipt has the product or service on it, and you use, it basically adds to the financial statement balance. So you set up, okay, so we're gonna set up a product or service. So remember, there's a million ways to get there. So under your sales, it's your product and service list here. You also can get to it from the gear icon and products and services, okay? I just wanna remind you, there's not all features that I'm gonna show you in this demo version are available in all versions of QuickBooks. Inventory tracking is only available in Plus and Advanced, so those top two, okay? All right, so in your products and services, there are 4 different types of items. There's an inventory, a non-inventory, a service, and a bundle. And remember, the inventory items only in Products Plus and Advanced. The non-inventory, so inventory, if you want QuickBooks to track inventory for you, use non-inventory for things that you sell that are a tangible good. So a stuff, right? So if you sell something, let's see here, a non-inventory item, somebody type in the chat what your business does if you sell a product. I need an example and I can't seem to think of one. T-shirts, I love it. Thank you, Jamie. Okay, so if you're selling a t-shirt, so we'll say that you're like a gift shop, right? So non-inventory parts could be t-shirts that are a low cost and low value. So you don't want to necessarily you don't want to track them as inventory because you only spent 10 cents on each t-shirt. So you would track them as a non-inventory item. So it's things that you sell, tangible things, not services. It's tangible things that you sell that you don't want to track as inventory. For most of you, and I'm going to tell, this is a personal opinion of mine. For most of you, if you do sell stuff, I would suggest that you set all of the stuff that you sell, the tangible things, up as non-inventory items, because when you're tracking inventory in QuickBooks, if you're not meticulous about it, it can go off the rails very quickly. So if you're selling things and services, so stuff and services, do your stuff as non-inventory items, do your services as services, and then you can bundle them together, for example, if you need to. So your non-inventory parts, I like them better than inventory parts. You can track inventory. I'm going to point you to the QuickBooks University and make you watch all the demos though. So the bundles combine those into one group, and it just speeds up the entry. So for example, if you sold gift baskets, instead of picking 3 flowers, 2 candles, and a teddy bear, you can create a bundle that says, this bundle is called the flower candle teddy bear basket, for example. All right, so for now, I'm going to pick services, and we're going to name our services. So this name right here is what shows up on the sales receipt or invoice. So this is a name to us and doesn't necessarily appear on all the forms that we would sell to a customer. Okay, so I'm making a services. So we're going to create one that says, we're going to say it's 60 minutes because we're going to sell our services. And you guys don't watch me type. I can't type when you guys are watching. And a SKU, so this SKU is like if you had a UPC, for example, you could add it here. You could create a SKU number like the old school SKU numbers that we, if it makes sense. So if you want to create a SKU, you can. Categories are a way to further divide the products and services you sell. So for example, if we were creating those t-shirts as a non-inventory part, we could create t-shirts, and then we could create a category that says t-shirts. And then our name here would be blue t-shirts. And then we would have a second one for red t-shirts and a third one for green t-shirts, for example. Kevin, I'll answer your question in a minute. Okay, so then here you would pick if you had categories set up, it's just another way to kind of divide your services or your products and services into different kind of buckets so you can run reports on them later. So when you're setting these up, think about like what you're doing. Like Tina said that she sells art classes. So she might have a category that is art classes, and then underneath those, she could have a 60-minute class, a friends and family class, a private class. She could have multiple kinds of classes. Because then let's say she also has a retail part where she sells all of the artwork that people make, or little kits for people to make their own artwork. So you could do a lot of different things here. So think about what you sell and how you would want to group them together to get that best kind of reporting possible. So here, this description, you check this box. It says, I sell this to my customers, because that's why we're setting it up. And you would say 60-minute accounting consultation. You guys stop watching me type. And then we would sell it. And because we're accountants, we're like gajillionaires, so we're going to sell it for $2,000. And then here, if there's a rate, you don't have to put a rate in if you don't want to. And then your services, this income account, you would pick where you want it to track on your financial statements. So when you click this drop down, it takes us back to your chart of accounts. So this is it. See how it all kind of works together. So when we sell 60 minutes of accounting help, it's going to go to our services income, but maybe we want it to go to our labor income instead. Okay, so you could pick whatever thing you wanted it to sell. So we can track it to our beer sales if we wanted to. All right. If you happen to live somewhere where services are taxable, or there are tax collected, you can edit your sales tax here and tell it what it is. If your item isn't taxable and this services is not taxable in Arizona, because services are not, if you click this, still don't see what you're looking for, that's where the non-taxable comes up. So they are very much like the way that QuickBooks is doing this with sales tax can be kind of a pain in the butt. So just know that it's here. You have to click this link and then non-taxable. And then you click you're done and it goes back. The one thing that I want to tell you is I just want to point this out. This purchasing information, I purchased this product or service from a vendor. This is that this two-sided transaction that we talked about earlier that's available in the upper versions of QuickBooks. So this means that when pretending that this is like, I'm going to pretend that this is beer, right? And that we're just, we're going to sell a case of beer for $2,000, right? So clearly we would buy this beer to sell it. So you would check this box if you wanted to track when you bought beer versus when you were selling beer, okay? So just know that this is here. You would use this for projects and job costing. So if you want one of those two-way transactions, this is where you would go to do this. Okay, here also, you can click on this little image and you can upload a picture of something. So here's a picture of my dog, Barbara Gordon. And so, if it will, so we can save this picture as part of this product or service. So, and then when it will show up as a little thumbnail on all of the things that all of the transactions that you have. So you can see like this design and fountains, for example, these are the things that are nestled. These are categories. So design is a category, fountains are a category, landscaping is a category. But meanwhile, gardening is a product or service that's set up. Okay. All right. So let's say our beer changed price. We could click on this edit and we could change the price of our beer to be whatever we wanted, okay? You can also, from this edit menu, you can make things inactive. You could run a report on it to see how many you've sold. And let's say that you wanna set up, let's say we're setting up our t-shirts and we have our category of t-shirts and then we want our non-inventory items to be red t-shirts and blue t-shirts and green t-shirts, then we could just duplicate it. And then we could say it's a keg of beer instead of a case of beer. Got it? So you can duplicate transactions like that. You can do all kinds of things from this window. Again, these little buttons here, you can print your list, you can export your list. This settings you can display different columns. There's a show more option here. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can have it display. You can also show 300 transactions. You can make it compact. You can ungroup it by category. So you can mess around with the view here on what it is that you see when you look at the product and service list. Okay. Couple of things. So Kevin asked if Jamie's selling t-shirts and you're saying not to include those as inventory, i.e. classify them as non-inventory, would it make sense for Jamie then to purchase a version of QuickBooks that doesn't do inventory? So yes, Kevin, you're exactly right. So yeah, I don't recommend that you use, like, inventory in QuickBooks is really persnickety. Remember how I was showing you this button that says I purchased this product from services or vendors? If you use inventory, you have to set this up, right? And then when you buy the products that go into your inventory, you would then have to pick this transaction. You would have to pick that you're buying beer when you purchase it so that it adds it into inventory. And then you have to sell beer to take it out of inventory. So inventory is a little bit more complicated in QuickBooks. And then Lori asked about the picture. So this is where you would upload a picture of your product or service. If you want to add a logo to QuickBooks, that's under your account and settings, and it's here for the logo. So we'll add a different picture of Barbara Gordon because my dog is real cute. I'm just saying. So she's a real pain in the ass too. Okay. Tina asked if on my invoices, I track teaching as time and service, but I also track art material fees. Do I need to tax the materials? And Tina, I'm I'm totally going to punt that because it all depends on way more factors than I can answer for you. So if you're in Arizona, the Arizona Department of Revenue holds classes on what's taxable and what's not. But I would say if you mark up the material fees, again, in Arizona, that's likely a taxable activity and you would have to collect sales tax. If you only purchase the materials and then resell them for basically like a reimbursement, then and you paid the sales tax when you bought them, that's generally a okay workaround. A return, Dwight's asking about a return to Home Depot. So no, it would go, returns go in as negative expenses to the vendor that you purchased them from, and we'll talk about that when we get to the expense portion. Which now we're at vendors and expenses. Okay, so someone else asked, would this be used in purchasing materials for projects? So you could, if you were using it to purchase materials for projects, you could turn this on and tell it that you're buying steel here. So if you want it to track, in order to do job costing and projects in QuickBooks, you need to turn on those two-way transactions. So not only do I sell this to someone, but I also buy this from someone, okay? So I know that's kind of not the best answer at this moment, but let's go on to the vendors and expenses, and then we'll try to talk about some more things that will make that more clear. Okay, so I'm on page 50 now. And we're going to talk about how you set up a new vendor, your best way to track and record your expenses in QuickBooks Online, determine the appropriate settings that you want to use for your expenses, recognize your alternative entry points because you can enter transactions a million different ways into QuickBooks, print bills or pay bills and print checks. Okay, so we're going to go through the vendor center demo. So here under expenses, there's kind of two centers in this left navigation bar. So here's our expenses, and we're going to go to our vendors. So you can get to this list from here, or you can click on here and then go to vendors. There's a money bar here at the top. These are kind of, remember I said I started using QuickBooks in 2007, like these little money bars were not there then, so I mostly just ignore these. But basically what it's saying is that I have a $125 purchase order that's open. I have $848 of overdue bills to my vendor. I have $1,600 total due that's been to vendors, and I've paid $39.26 in the last 30 days. So these things might be helpful for you. I don't even notice them because they weren't there when I learned QuickBooks Online. So use them if you like them. If you want to see them, you can click on them and it'll filter what it's for. And if you do click on them, it'll give you the information in the little kind of drop down, and then you can clear your filter up here at the top. There's a little link that showed up there. Okay. So let's say this is Craig's landscaping company, and let's say that he's decided to hire Barbara Gordon to be his supermodel, okay, right? Oops, I can't even spell my dog's last name. So to add Barbara Gordon as a vendor, I clicked on this plus new vendor button, and I'm gonna type her name. So if she were a company, then I would type her name here, right? But then I wouldn't put her name in the first, middle, and last name. That I would put in her email and her phone number. And if there was a billing rate, you could add that. You could add the terms. So how often do I have to pay her? I'll make it due on receipt. We'll talk about this opening balance in a minute. Then account number, if I had an account number. And this business ID number we'll talk about in a minute, default expense account, we're going to make it professional fees. This, we put in our address. And then any notes we have, like And then this, I want to point out this attachment because we can add pictures of Barbara Gordon if we want to. This right here is where, for a vendor, you would add their W-9, okay? And for all of you that don't know, the W-9 form is the form that you use. You're required to do this if you own a business. You are required to collect this form from anyone that you pay for services, rent, lawyers, royalties, anything like that. So if you're making payments to people for things that are not stuff, you need to collect a W-9 from them. The best thing that you do, the best thing you can do is when someone sends you a bill and you bought services from them, or you bought services and stuff, then you should say, hey, thanks for your bill. Go ahead and send me your W-9 and I'll get you paid, okay? When they fill out this form and send it back to you, they have to check one of these boxes up here in part 3. If there's nothing checked, then go back to them. The reason that I want to show you this is if they check something here, like that they're an individual sole proprietor filing as a partnership, or one of these two, or an LLC that's filing as a partnership, right? Then they're required to receive a 1099 from you. If they check C Corp, S Corp, or put a C or S in this box, then there's no W-9. So QuickBooks will track this for you. So if Barbara Gordon is truly a company and she's a corporation, then she wouldn't need a 1099. But how would we know that when we're paying her? So we're going to ask her for her information. She's going to send it to us, but based on the boxes that she checks here, will drive whether she is eligible for a 1099, okay? So if Barbara Gordon was just an individual, we would check the box. If she's a corporation, we would not check the box. Make sense? Then here in the attachments, instead of just attaching her really cute picture, we would attach the W-9 here. If you have a contract with someone, you could attach it here as well. All of those. So if you have a contract, any of those kind of things, this is where you attach it, right? So let's answer a couple questions. So Cynthia, no, you don't have to 1099 someone if you buy stuff from them. And then if you're a subcontractor, you request W-9s from your vendors. If you're making payments to someone, you have to request their W-9 if you're paying them for services, okay? So just know we're gonna leave Barbara Gordon in here for a minute as an example, because now I'm finally gonna answer Tina's other question. So now I know that Barbara Gordon's in here, but let's say that we've decided that we're not gonna use her anymore. From this little drop down, you can make her inactive, okay? So that's where you do that. Yes, nonprofits need W-9s. Nonprofits need to collect W-9s from people they pay, but they don't receive W-9s or don't receive 1099s from people that paid them. So that's kind of I wasn't sure, Darius, how you were asking that there. Okay, one other thing. So let's say we're working with Barbara Gordon, and when we open her up, transactions for her would show in this little window. But remember how we were just on that screen and there was a whole list of vendors there? There's no real, like from here, you can't really see easily how to get back there. Do you see these little dots in this line? If you click on this, the whole vendor list comes back up. And then you can pick on Bob's Burger Joint, for example, and see that we have 3 transactions to Bob in the last little bit. Okay. All right, so there's a lot of 1099 questions coming through. I'm just going to leave them in the Q&A and I will answer them at the end. And if not, I'm going to point you in the direction of the next time I'm talking about the payroll class for the SBDC, and then we'll talk about it then. Okay, so you can see transactions here. You can filter the transactions to say, show me the open bills, or show me all the payments that I made, or all the checks that I've written. You can filter by date as well. So show me everything for this year, show me everything for last year, those kind of things. All right. Okay, so vendor payments, kind of clear as mud. That's how you would set up a vendor. If you have a new transaction with your vendor, you can find them on this list and click the new transaction button. So you can add a time activity, you can create batch transactions, you can enter a bill, enter an expense, enter a check, enter a purchase order, enter a vendor credit, or pay down your credit card. So someone had asked about, so I showed you how to make them inactive. So this, how you would hide them is, again, you could edit. If you click on this edit button, this window pops back up, and you remember seeing this before. The inactive button is here as well. So we can make Bob's Burger Joint inactive also. This same make inactive button, or from the vendor list, this initial list that we were on, you would click here, make inactive. You can do that same thing in multiple ways. All right, let me see if I want to include anything else. Okay, so let's talk about expenses. So now we have all of our vendors in there, and then we go to our expense tab. On the expense tab, you can click this new transaction. This drop-down menu looks exactly the same as the one we just saw, which, shocker, under the new menu is exactly the same as this one right here. Okay, so just remember that there's, again, multiple ways to get to things in QuickBooks. So you would pick time activity here if you wanted to enter time that was billable to a customer. You would enter a bill if you wanted to record an expense that was going to be paid later. You would do an expense if you used your debit card or credit card to buy something. You would enter a check for any paper checks that you wrote, because there's a box to put in the check number. You could create a purchase order if you wanted to, if you were using purchase orders, for example, but purchase orders are only available in Plus and Advanced, so those top two versions. Vendor credit is there. This vendor credit is not available in the Simple Start, in the lowest version. Okay, so let's do a bill. So here, this screen is going to look almost exactly the same, whether you're entering a bill, entering a credit card credit, entering a vendor credit, entering a check. All of these things, they're going to be slightly different, right? But mostly they're the same. You're going to start with the vendor name. So we're going to pick our adorable Barbara Gordon. Her terms, the terms are, when is this bill due, right? So we pick due on receipt when we set Barbara Gordon up, but let's say this one time she's being really nice and we have 60 days to pay. So she billed us today, so we owe her on April 16th. All of these numbers here will populate based on what you pick. If I pick net 30, it backs up the due date to March 17th. Okay, if I pick due on receipt, it backs the due date up to February 15th. So we'll go back to our net 60. Here, this bill number is what invoice number did she generate for us, right? Whatever it is, doesn't matter. This tags, this is where I was telling you we would tag the PPP. We'll save this for Thursday, so we can talk about it more if we want to. This legal and professional fee category, remember when we were setting Barbara Gordon up, I picked a default account. So if you buy products from someone, for example, for resale, so let's say that Tina's Art Supply and Class Studio, for example. So Tina might buy art supplies from different kinds of people. Like, let's say she uses one supplier, but she buys paint and clay and yarn, for example. She might not want a default category set up for that vendor that she buys those products from, because she might want to pick paint for this one, yarn for that one, and clay for the next one. Okay, so you don't have to set up a default category. I just did because I wanted to. And then here we can say this is for January or whatever memo we want to ourselves, and Barbara Gordon's going to bill us $100, right? This billable box here is how you would track that this expense is going to be billable to one of my clients or customers. So I'm going to track this $100 so I can add it on to an invoice and collect money from someone later to reimburse me for it or mark it up. If you need to pay tax on it, you check this box, okay? Then if you do check these boxes, you pick who your customer is. So let's say that we use this $100 and we're going to resell it to Amy's Bird Sanctuary. You would pick Amy's Bird Sanctuary here. All of these last three boxes are not as important as this one. This category right here is how this $100 will show up as an expense on your financial statement, okay? So the other thing is you can still track it to a customer without making it billable or taxable. This customer part is when you guys were asking about projects and job costing and things like that and contracting additions, this is how you tell it what, there would be a column here that says project, and this is how you tell it what project you're working on, okay? So this is where you could do this. The other thing that I want to show you is here, I'm going to click this to squish this down, and I'm going to expand this item detail. So here is where we would tell it if we were buying, I don't think I have anything, yeah. So this product and service list, this is the same list that we were looking at earlier, right? So you can pick that you're buying a pump and for Amy's Bird Sanctuary, for example. And this is one of those two-sided transactions where not only do we sell these pumps for these fountains to people, but we also buy these pumps, okay? So any of these things, so when you're in here and you're like, you put this here, but you're like, oh wait, no, it should go here, you can click delete to get rid of it. You can clear all these lines, you can clear all these lines. Here, someone had asked earlier about receipts. This is where you would attach the receipt, right? So you could attach a copy of the receipt, and then when you click on it, then it loads this picture of my dog sleeping on the back of the couch, okay? So those, like any of those, this is where you attach copies of receipts. Remember, if you were to copy this transaction, for example, whatever you put here in the attachment is going to copy with it also. So if you attach the wrong thing or you made a copy and you want to remove it, you click the X to remove it, okay? If you need to make it recurring, let's say that we're going to pay Barbara Gordon every month, you would click this make recurring button, and then it would ask you to schedule it up here. What do you want to call this? How do you want to do it? Your options are schedule, remind you to put it in, or leave it unscheduled, and then create it days in advance. So if you pay rent, for example, you can create a bill to your landlord and tell it to create 5 days in advance, because having your computer system or having QuickBooks tell you your rent is due on the 1st isn't helpful, because if you have to mail them a check, you should know by the 25th, right? So you tell it who the vendor is, how often you want it to remind you, monthly on the 1st of every month, starting on this date, and by this date or after this, 10 times, however you want to do it. So that's how you would set up recurring transactions as well. The other thing, I'm going to close. The other thing is when you're in the bill screen, there's a little kind of recent button here that'll show you all the recent bills that you were doing. So this is similar to, remember how the magnifying glass was up here? So the magnifying glass isn't here when you're in these windows, but your recent transactions are. So let's say that we entered our Cal telephone, but realized it's actually $65.50 instead of $56.50. We can just go right into it and edit the amount to be $65.60, okay? One of the other things that you can do, so now that I'm out of the enter bill screen, if I go back here, here's my Cal telephone bill that I was just doing, right? The other things that are down here is after you've entered a bill and saved it, so this Cal telephone bill has been paid. So there was a payment made to it, but $9 is owed because I just changed the amount. You can do loads of things with that. Remember, there's buttons down here at the bottom too about the make recurring, which we talked about briefly. But under the more button, if you entered it by mistake, you can delete it. You can copy it if you want. Remember how I was saying if you copy something, it's going to keep the attachments that you put. The transaction journal is less important because most business owners that I know don't have brains that think in accounting debits and credits. So this transaction journal would show the debits and credits if we wanted to see all of the way through this. And then the audit history. So if I go into the audit history, I can see that Craig Carlson added this, but I can see that right here, because QuickBooks thinks I'm Craig Carlson, that the amount was edited. And it'll tell me that the amount was changed to $65.50 and the open balance is $9. So it'll show me that I entered that I edited that transaction later. Okay, so now I'm going to re-enter that bill to Barbara Gordon. So I'm going to click my plus new button and go to my bill. Again, I can go find Barbara Gordon's name on the list. And okay, so there's options here down at the bottom. There's a little caret. So save and schedule payment. We can talk about Melio on Thursday. Save and new if we have more bills that we want to enter, or save and close if we're done. So I'm going to save and close because I'm done with that. And then to pay a bill in QuickBooks, you would click the plus new button and go to pay bills. And then it's going to pull up a list of all of our bills. And if right here, it's going to say, all right, how are you going to pay these bills? So our options here, I'm going to pay it with a MasterCard. I'm going to pay it with my checking account. So we're just going to pretend that we're going to pay Barbara Gordon with our checking account. I'm going to pay her today, and my starting check number is 71. But if you want to print your checks from QuickBooks, you check this box, okay? And then I'm going to tell it I want to pay Barbara Gordon. If there were a vendor credit for her, for example, it would show here. And when I remember how it said automatically apply, those vendor credits would automatically apply. Let's say we're going to pay the Cal Telephone bill and our PG&E bill. We're going to pay our utility bills and Barbara Gordon, okay? So we're going to pay these 3 bills by a check that we're going to print. Well, 3 checks that we're going to print. I'm going to click this, and then my options are to save and print, or save and close. And I'm going to save and close because I want to show you how to get to the print window. Under this plus new button, here's my print checks, okay? So if you happen to save and new or save and close or something, and you get to the print, then you can get to the print checks from here. You can do it in one step from the pay bill window. You can just go pay bills and then save and print as well. So under your print checks, it's gonna, all right, so this, I'm not gonna do this. You guys are just gonna have to trust me. So here, this little setup wizard is so that you can make the printer line up with all the boxes and lines on your printed checks. So you would view and print a sample, you would hit print here, and then you would hold it up to the light and try to match it all up, okay? So make sure you go through this. This is a voucher type check. These are standard type checks, but I'm just gonna get past this so that you can see. And I'm not sure it'll let me in the demo. Okay, so here it's gonna ask me, what account are you printing the checks for? So my checking account. And then it's gonna ask me my starting check number, and our starting check number was 71. And then from here, you're gonna review and print. And then it's gonna come up with this, and you'll see that there's 3 pages here. And so I'm gonna print these 3 pages, and then it's going to, like, it'll print out on my printer on check stock, all right? And then it's gonna ask this question, did your checks print okay? And you say yes or no, they didn't print okay, or no, none of them printed and I need to print them all again, okay? So, and then when you're done, they'll come out of this print check window, and then they'll be all set. And if you look back in your vendor tab, under Barbara Gordon now, she has a bill and a check number 71 that we paid her with. This memo that's here comes from her account number that we entered into her vendor record. All right. Okay, so this was kind of as far as I wanted to get today. A couple of things that I wanted to tell you really quickly. If you just buy something with your debit card or a credit card, use your expense account. Use an expense type transaction, okay? Because you can just enter it that way and be done, right? If you were to actually manually write a check to someone, you would go to write checks. You can check this box to print this check later if you wanted to print it without doing the pay bills part. You can pay bills and mark those checks, mark those bills to be printed later, come into the check screen, check this box, and then you can print 4 checks, for example. So you can add checks to your printer queue just as a regular check without a bill payment, if that makes sense. So there's a million things that you can add here. If you know your check number, you can just do it this way. Okay. Okay, so let's answer some questions for the next little while. Fabiola, do you prefer to use the expense window option versus just entering on the check register? So QuickBooks Online is designed to work with your bank feeds, which we'll talk about on Thursday. But your bank feeds, so basically what it's doing is it's bringing in all that information from the bank about what it is, like who you bought things from, okay? And I'll just show it to you really quickly so that you can see how it looks. So it would look like this, but if you guys think about like how, when your checking account, for example, when it clears a check, it literally will just say, I downloaded a bank history here that we can look at. So like it'll say here, it was a check that was paid for $34.20 and it was check 10,308. Well, this right here, this tells me nothing about who I wrote this check to or why. So the short answer to your question is, how do I like to enter things? It depends. So mostly I enter things from the bank register or from the bank feed in QuickBooks. But I make sure that if I'm going to print checks or pay bills or things like that, that I'm using those features built into QuickBooks. So if I'm going to go in here and go to pay bills and I'm going to send out a bunch of checks, I'm going to do it through the pay bill screen, or I'm going to enter the checks. And then what happens is it will then match those transactions as they clear the bank, which is what you want. So remember that your transactions should go into QuickBooks at the time that they happen or very soon after the time that they happen, and not necessarily when they clear the bank. Because if you are have to manage your cash flow, like many of us entrepreneurs do, you want to know that you have $10,000 worth of checks outstanding that you haven't done, that haven't cashed yet. And that's not going to be reflected in any of your balances in QuickBooks. Like right here, it tells me my balance and my checking account. If I don't record those checks as I write them, whether I handwrite them or print them, they're not going to be reflected in this balance and my books are going to be incorrect until those checks clear the bank. So, so the short answer is it depends. Most of the time, if you're writing a check, put it into QuickBooks, wait for it to clear the bank. If you use your debit card or credit card, you could probably, as long as you don't have open vendor bills in QuickBooks, you could probably just wait for them to show up in the bank feed and then record them that way. Darius asked, does syncing with your bank save you a lot of work? I edit the bank transactions that are uploaded. So again, this one depends on the type of transactions. Tina was saying earlier that she was having a hard time because the bank deposits would just match with invoices. So you have to be careful about working with your bank feed. But if you're just talking about like your Cox communication bills or your utility bills, or, you know, like your insurance payment, for example, like those things, you can really automate a lot of stuff and save yourself a lot of time, which is the part of the benefit of using your bank feeds and using QuickBooks Online. But you have to be careful. Not all things can be matched really efficiently. So some things work better if you go through the whole workflow, the whole accounting process, instead of just recording it as bank deposits as revenue kind of thing. So, okay. So Pauline asked if you can download Mint into QuickBooks. So you wouldn't link your Mint account to QuickBooks. You would link the bank account that is included in Mint to QuickBooks. So that's how I would do it. I actually use Mint personally. I love it. If you guys don't know what it is, it's a way to manage your personal finances and track everything, because I don't know if you know this, but accounting kind of sucks and it's a real pain in the ass. So I don't like to do it for myself, but I'll do it for clients all day long. But when it comes time to do it for myself, I'm like, oh, again, I just did this last week. So like I would unlink the bank account from Mint and then link it to QuickBooks Online instead. Okay, what else can I answer? All right. Okay, in that case, since I have you for 2 more minutes, I'm going to show you one other thing. So really quickly, because there was so much talk about 1099, so we're just going to talk about them real quick. So 2 more seconds, hold on. Okay, so the purpose of a 1099 is to report certain types of payments that are made during the course of your business. Forms are due to the recipient by the 31st of the prior year, and IRS copies are due by January 31st for the prior year also, unless you file electronically, and then the due date is February 28th. This, if you use an electronic service like Tax 1099, it would show there, okay? So there's 2 types of 1099 forms. One of them is a 1099 miscellaneous. One of them is a 1099 NEC, which stands for non-employee compensation. So you report miscellaneous income, royalty payments, rents, legal settlements, and random other types of expenses here. Your non-employee compensation is for all payments made to people that provided services that were not employees. You report your payments for legal services here. So if you pay a lawyer to help you become an LLC and review your lease agreement, it would go on a 1099 NEC. If you were sued and had to write a check to settle the lawsuit that, you know, let's say you lost, it would go on a 1099 miscellaneous form, okay? Common exceptions to having to file the form are generally if you made payments to a corporation, including a limited liability company that was treated as a C Corp or an S Corp, but you were to report attorney's fees regardless of the entity type. So if you paid an attorney, you report it. If you made payments for merchandise, so again, if you're buying stuff, it's stuff, right? It's a common exception. Payments to a real estate agent, if that agent uses 1099 miscellaneous to report rent to the property owner. As an accountant, I've never known this at the front end. Like I see that my client owes so-and-so for rent. I have no idea if so-and-so is going to actually 1099 another landlord. So I report all rents. And then there's some specific instructions, just some other random instructions if it applies to you. This is what the 1099 miscellaneous form looks like. So rents, royalties, your name goes here, your ID number goes here, their ID number goes here, their name and address go here. On the NEC form, it's the same, your information, their information, how much you paid them. All right. And then remember, thanks for your invoice. Will you please send me your W-9 so I can process your payment? All right. So there was a couple questions. So all landlords, unless they're a corporation, all lawyers. So someone said, even if it's just Legal Shield's monthly fee. So I would say that Legal Shield isn't really for services though. I would say that Legal Shield is more of a subscription. So, and it doesn't matter if you're the corporation, it matters if they're the corporation, right? So what they're checking on the W-9. So if you didn't file them, you can file them now or just collect the information and file again next year. So in theory, you should have filed for 2021. So I can tell you the IRS is allowed to impose failure to file penalties for 1099s, but I've never seen them do that. So, and I've been doing this 22 years, but just because I said that, now they're going to. I'll knock on wood. So, okay. So that was that. Just a little bit more about 1099s. Okay, so if Tina asked about unlinking an old accountant. So under the gear, because we're using our brains more, manage users. Your accounting firms are here. There would be 2 names here, for example, and then you would just be able to delete the user for there. And then if you forgot a password, you should be able to see what the email address is associated with the user if you're the administrator. And then you could go into, they could go into forgot my password. Yeah, and short of that, I'm not sure. So Tina's question was, how do I unlink my old account and email address as an account verification or login when I forgot my password? So if you have to update your password with Intuit, you're going to have to reach out to them directly. So there's like, because if you can get logged in, you can manage your Intuit account here and you can change your email address, but I'm not sure what you're asking quite there. Okay, in the CAPTCHA funny story. So there was a professor, and he was the same guy that did Duolingo, and he was asked to digitize the New York Times database, but what happened was the automation, like the AI that would read the characters on the old newsprint, sometimes had a really hard time reading the characters. So that's how the caption and reCAPTCHA started, is because they would take the images of those words that the computer couldn't read, the OCR for the AI, and it would put it in the caption and reCAPTCHA. And if 9 out of 10 people said that those words were like beehive and Thursday, then that's how the computer learned that the typeface on the newsprint said beehive and Thursday. So that's how they digitized the New York Times. And then the guy went on to start Duolingo. There's a podcast that NPR does for Guy Raz called How I Built This, and they're amazing and super inspiring and make me want to be a better entrepreneur. So, okay. All right. Let me know what else I can answer for you guys, if anything. Sweet. We did it all then, right?
Yes, great, amazing timing, Tanya. Should we share that we were a bit nervous because we had a high demand for our webinar, and you did fantastic, Tanya.
Thank you. Yeah, so Alex asked for my contact information. So I'll put my email in the chat, but then it's also on the last slide. So.
Yes, and for those of you who are interested in joining us in the part 2, that is going to be on Thursday at 8 a.m. the same time, Mountain Standard Time, to 11. I did provide the link in the chat box for those of you who are interested in continuing the webinar.
And Tina, kind of. So just reach out.
Check.
Hey, yeah, and Thursday, we'll record Thursday too, right?
Yes, yes, and I will be sending over an email later today with the recordings because I had some technical issues. So I'll be sending over those recordings and also reminders to join us on Thursday.
Sweet.
Awesome. Any other last minute questions? Okay, it looks like we finished amazing on time, Tanya.
I was a little nervous when we took a break. I was like, are we gonna make it to that spot? I have no idea. So.
Yeah, it was great. Now we know also for our next webinar, we did everything was well. Also, just for some closing remarks, thank you once again, Tanya. Thank you for those of you who have joined us today. Like I said, for more resources and any more information in regards to anything in business, please feel free to check us out. We're the Maricopa SBDC. I will be providing the link again in the chat box for those of you who are interested at no cost business counseling. Thank you so much, Tanya, for offering this resource for everyone today. We really look forward to working with you again in the future, seeing you on Thursday. And I will be emailing everyone just a reminder again for today's recording.
Cool. All right. Well, go slay it, everyone. I'll see you on Thursday.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you on Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.